And welcome to Dude, What's the Bid, episode 37. Here every week, Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central, live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, wherever else that we plug into. My name is Kevin Hill with Brush Fast Research, and as always, I am joined by Casey Larkin over at Fairlanes. Casey, how are you doing this week?
Doing well, Kev. Doing well.
Yeah, it's the last week of January. It's flown by.
It's unbelievable.
I know. And January is always a long month anyway, right? Because it's doldrums of getting back into the swing of things sometimes, but it's usually like 5 weeks long. It's 31 days, and it just seems to be a long month. But this one's kind of flown by.
Yeah, I don't know. A good recharge of the batteries over the holidays with the family, and yeah, it's been long, I guess, from days of the month perspective, but it's been flying by.
Yeah, it's time to get geared up for 2025. You got an oil change this week. I got an oil change this week too. It took me literally. I was just like, well, what am I going to do? And by the time it was within 10 minutes, car was in and out and gone. So you're telling me about your story about 2 hours. I was like, oh man, I'm glad I didn't go there.
You were able to get your oil changed in 10 minutes. That is astonishing to me.
Yeah. I sat down for like 30 seconds. I was able to maybe get on LinkedIn before they called me back up there. I paid, and the car was coming out. And I was like, I hope you guys changed the oil. I mean,
what a customer experience. That's wonderful. I mean, I went to Take 5 hoping to get the same experience. I mean, it says it in the name, right? It's just, we're going to take 5 minutes of your time and you're going to roll out of here. And I mean, it's funny when you do roll out, they've got a sign there that says, honk for wonderful service. I was hoping, I think I actually did honk that day. Honked, had a decent experience, even though it took an hour and a half. At least they gave me a cold water. But they tightened the oil drain valve too tight, stripped. So the last time I went to get the oil changed, hey, buddy, sorry, we can't even change the oil because we can't get the drain plug out. So you need a new drain pan. Anyways, finally got the oil changed. And, looking for a new oil change guy, though, if you know what I mean.
Small service stations, always the best. Always the best. It just is. But yeah, January, you get everything set up to go out. Manifest is coming up, I guess, in a couple weeks here. That should be exciting for everybody. Kicking off 2025, really the first conference of the year, and into February. Exactly. The freight market seems to be doing pretty good, and certainly better than it was a year ago. And it's just another year.
Another year, but it does seem to be different than the last 2 or 3, right? I mean, I don't know. I think the last I heard, there hasn't really been that much of an increase in demand, right, or freight volumes, but capacity still kind of continues to bleed the market, which is certainly a good thing for when we do need a little bit more volume. So things are shaping up for a better year here in 25 and 24, and seeing some posts that, I think Ben Gordon had his conference
last week, and
I think I saw Don Everhart saying that he's seeing a little bit of increased activity in the M&A space. So, I think it's green pastures for 2025.
Yeah, I think it is too. I think everyone's very bullish on 2025. When I say very bullish, I mean everyone is very bearish about 2024. So bullish just means better. It doesn't mean ecstatic. But things are turning around. I think M&A, you've seen people raise money a little bit. you're seeing some of those exits. You're seeing, M&A is some activities going on. Spoke with Spencer Tinney yesterday. They're doing a webinar for the TCA right now, actually, and talking about M&A activity in 2025. So I'll be watching that webinar sometime this afternoon, and they always have great information over there about what's going on, especially on the asset side and brokerage side too, right? Non-tech in a lot of ways. So as John Larkin, your dad was saying a couple weeks ago, the private equity exits and turnarounds or exits in kind of the carrier space, asset base, be eyes are fixated on that.
Right. I mean, I think it's that time on, right? I think PEs typically try to get their money back in 7-10 years.
Yep.
So yeah, chickens are hopefully coming home to roost here. I know that folks are excited to get some ammo back in the war chest to be able to reinvest for this. You can call it a bull market, right? I think the bottom is officially in. It's probably been in for a while. For
a while, right? And if you go back to earnings season, right now it's earnings season. You have a lot of trucking companies reporting, but the public ones is much more optimistic and upbeat Q1 of 2025 than it was Q1 of 2024. So I'll focus on the deepest, longest freight recession those executives had been through. Optimistic about 2025.
Right, baby. Onward and upward.
Yep, onward and upward. We have a great show for today. We have a great guest. It is Jake Koppinger from FreightRoll, and we're going to talk about yard management and we're going to be in the yard today. So here comes Jake up here right now. Jake, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Good. How about your conversations? Let's start it off. What about your conversations you've been having lately, and how that relates to freight market or sentiment toward the freight market? How are people describing it to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's less about specific. So it's kind of funny. My background, I met your dad, John, Casey, through the old investing world and following the freight markets. And I've kind of, even though I'm in it, I've kind of stepped away from following, aside from, reading Freight Waves and all that. But where it's very relevant for us is the concept of shipper of choice, and how various truck drivers and carriers perceive the changes that are going on in the market and how that interacts with the cyclicality of it. And what I mean by that is we sell software to people that operate yards, so these are typically shippers, right? And it's typically a mandate that comes down from the shipper for some sort of adoption of technology. And carriers and drivers are more compliant when the market's weak, right? Because they want to work, they want the freight, so they're happy to do whatever. When the market tightens, that becomes a little bit of a different animal. But what we do is we actually, we've seen a sea change in the market since COVID around drivers sort of going from really lagging technology adopters to moving toward more preferential or preferring digital type experiences, which is what we bring to the yard. So some of the conversations we've been having around, how do you become shipper of choice during this next cycle? Is it going to, as the market tightens, and carriers are going to be turning away more loads and drivers are going to be complaining more, how do you keep those drivers happy? And so that actually plays reasonably well with where we're at in the cycle in terms of what we're doing. So those are just at a high level relative to the cycle, some of the conversations that we're having.
And that's really interesting, right? It's a very good point, right? Freight Waves, they still have shipper of choice, right? when I was there, I worked on that, kind of led that research into it, and oversaw, that whole process. And it's a really good barometer of the market, right? The market's going up, shipper of choice becomes, much more prevalent, right?
Yep.
Much more important. So you hear more chatter about it. When the market's down, it seems to go away. There's, no one's really too concerned about it. When capacity is flush, when capacity gets tight, everyone starts talking about the importance of shipper of choice.
Yep. And, there's obvious reasons for that. And, it's been a pretty loose market for several years, as you guys mentioned. And so, I think what's been interesting over the last 5 years is just how the COVID pandemic, all the supply chain bottlenecks, all that really exposed the fragility of the supply chain, and people, they sort of realized that there are a lot of changes that need to be put into place, and some of those are beneficial for things like shipper of choice, like what we do, and it's it takes a little while, as everything does in the supply chain world, but starting to see some of that, which is nice.
So Jake, how about some? Let's talk about FreightRoll. Let's talk about your background, kind of how you got into it, and certainly what FreightRoll does.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
Piggyback on that, we'd love to learn more about why would you leave Wall Street and get into a technology for improving yards, right?
That go from what, Citadel?
Yeah.
Citadel, is that right?
Yep.
Citadel to trucking yards.
Yeah. No, so my background, before I get into what we do specifically, I grew up in this. I used to help manage my father's warehouse and a lot of yard management stuff with him back as a teenager at college. Dealt with a lot of truck drivers, even drove a little bit.
What kind of business did your father run?
He owned a steel distributor.
Okay.
So a lot of flatbed, and he came from that world, like U.S. Steel and National Steel before that, and so
a lot of coils, or a little bit of everything.
No, well, he would buy the coils, but have those sent to a slitter who'd chop them down into sheets, and he would inventory the sheets.
Right.
He move them out over to the mostly automotive, but a number of different, like he fed into Caterpillar and things like that. And so I worked on the shop floor up through management, as a teenager and through college, and just always through that really had a sort of soft spot for truck drivers. Kind of realized that these are sort of underappreciated folks in the market, and I've just always sort of had that in the back of my mind. That said, I graduated. I went into I was an engineer, but I graduated, went into finance, and then wound up investing in the space for about a decade, which is how I met your dad. And kind of always had that sort of same thought process, always had an interest in, I always had a belief that the industry had a lot of room for improvement. And, both my brother, who is a co-founder of the company, and my sister, who is not, but she worked as a broker for Coyote, and is now, went to UPS and is now at RXO. And so have some decent background in our family in the space. And so I always had an interest in starting a company in the space, driving to more efficiency and really helping, bring a little bit more power to the truck driver. And with all that was happening with the ELD mandate and Amazon really compressing supply chains, as we saw in the middle of the last decade, I felt that the time was right to try to go after the space. So I left what I was doing to start what would be considered something like a Uber Freight type deal. We had a little bit more focus. We were more focused on the flatbed world and open deck. Had lumber companies and steel companies as customers, but that was a brutally competitive space, as you well know. So we wound up building that up to be a little business, and really realized that technology couldn't differentiate, and it was we had good service, and but we decided that was just not where we wanted to be. So we sold off that business to a competitor, and we were struggling a bit with one of the problems we're solving now, which was, so what we do now is we bring the self-service experience to truck drivers in the yard. So think about check-in to check-out. When truck drivers arrive at the yard, there's a lot of manual back and forth, a lot of paperwork exchange, a lot of talking to people, all of that. We bring the experience of allowing drivers to steer their own experience through the yard. So they can do it on a phone, they can do it on a kiosk. It's kind of like the airport. 30 years ago at the airport, you always had to stand in line and wait till they talk to the gate agent. Now you can check in online, go straight to security, or you can go to the kiosk, go straight to security. That's what we do for truck drivers. And at the logistics company, we were a part of that whole process is the paperwork exchange. And at the logistics company, we had a customer that required us to submit paperwork in a certain order. And we screwed it up because it was still a manual process, and then held up $60,000 worth of freight payments for over a year. And I think that's not an unusual thing. That happens quite a bit, but it was just one of those aha moments of like, this is still happening. And we're at that time, it was like 2021. And this is a very large greenfield opportunity. And it was really a symptom of the broader problem that we're solving now, which is the paperwork exchange. And so that's how we got that. That's what we do in a nutshell. That's how my background led me there. I think it's a huge opportunity. I think yard automation is still very underpenetrated. Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, Jake, but like to that point, and like with your background as a an investor, like what is the cost of all of this paperwork that people are currently doing? If they're not using FreightRoll, like it's got to be a massive upside if a guy like you has decided to invest time and energy into it, right? Like this has got to be a big savings for shippers, a big opportunity to not only improve the driver experience, but hopefully, have their transportation and logistics costs, come down a little bit, right, or be less volatile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's in the tens of billions of dollars, but that's across a lot of different value props. So one of the things when you kind of think about what we're doing is we're creating a new standard operating procedure in the yard. So we're taking things from being all this manual interaction and all this paperwork exchange. We're speeding it up and reducing the amount of people that you're dealing with, and you're also reducing the amount of paperwork that you're sending back and forth. And then if you expand that out a bit, when you move from paper-based exchange, a lot of the interactions that happen, the reason the paper exists is because there's a bunch of different processes and invoicing and reconciliation, claims and payments and all that use that paperwork.
Rate cons, PODs.
Right. So you start thinking about eliminating the paper. It's not just the physical paper, which is about 10 cents a page in terms of like all the printer and ink and all that stuff. You start thinking about all of the other add-on effects of, if I'm going to digitize all this, now all of a sudden all my payments are digital. All my reconciliation can be automated. Think of like blockchain-y, smart contract type stuff, stuff that takes days and weeks and even months. Back to the year of non-payment. During that year, I think we had a quarterly call where we went through every single invoice like every quarter that was missed. And they would like look at it like, okay, yeah, we'll pay you. And then they didn't do it. And then we had to get back on and go back through all of it again. All that stuff sort of hashed out automatically in the background. The numbers get very, very large because there's just a lot of knock-on effects when you start digitizing a lot of that. It's complicated.
For sure.
It's kind of like an ecosystem play. There are payments companies, insurance companies, obviously shippers and carriers and brokers and 4PLs and all these companies that are interested in all this.
Right. It's interesting too. If you're able to capture this stuff at the yard, I think you're a little bit further upstream than some of the companies. Like, I'm an advisor, advisory board at Duke AI. It's like, the truck driver then takes that stuff from their own accounting perspective. They take the invoice, the POD, the accessorials, the rate con, they upload it, and can use that to get paid more quickly by their factor. But yeah, there's some downstream folks looking to kind of like speed up how quickly money flows for freight transactions, like an Upwell as well as another one that I think is doing some cool stuff. And we spoke with Charlie earlier, but it's interesting to think about, where you want to capture that data.
Yeah, I think there's kind of solving a similar problem, just different ways. I think we're going at it a little bit further upstream. The idea is to have it digital at the beginning. I never really turn it into paper. That's not entirely feasible. So our first deployments there's still paper being printed, and it's not fully paperless, largely because there's a whole element of all of these other parties involved. So we have essentially built ways to transition our customers off of the paper. So just very simplistically, right now, before any sort of implementation of our solution, you print 3 copies of a bill of lading. One's for you, one's for the carrier, one's for the customer. You implement us day one, you can get rid of that first copy, the one that you keep. And now think of it like DocuSign, like simply like capturing a digital signature, but you still print out the 2 other copies. But let's say your customer then adopts us or adopts one of our competitors, somebody that can digitize the proof of delivery process on that end. Well, now we keep a record of the fact that, that first copy doesn't need to be printed, and now that third copy doesn't need to be printed. So now we only print the 1 copy for the carrier, and as soon as the carrier is able to go paperless, then we can print 0 copies. And depending on the shipment, you may print 2 copies on this shipment. You may print 0 on this one. You may print 1 on this one, just like one after the other. And we handle that all seamlessly. Seems very trivial, but that's really the only way you're going to get from, fully paper to fully paperless over time without like a pretty sizable just shock to the way operations work in the system. So it's. We built it to take that into account, and again, that's a piece of the value prop. There's a bunch of other stuff involved there. So,
paper always amazes me, right? The we're still so paper based. I work for a company. I remember in 1999, it's like we're going paperless, and I thought the world was going paperless, and I guess we've made great strides in the last 25 years now, but. It's just strange. I'm like, when I get a paper receipt, the first thing I do, pull out my iPhone, take a picture of it. Because I know that I'm going to lose it in a matter of 30 seconds. I mean, it's just going to be gone. It's going to be floating out in the universe somewhere. And you think about, the driver has a piece of paper, the yard, delivery spot, the customer, right? And if you have to go back and audit, like you're describing, it is... these papers are well worn as well, right? The printer that it's printed on might not be the best printer out there. It might be hard to decipher exactly what it says 6 months, 9 months later after it's traveled across the U.S. maybe. And and been in outside in yards, you know, in dusty filing cabinets.
A lot of it gets lost.
I mean, it's just a night. It just seems like a nightmare to me. And you know, I my first jobs was before the internet, right? So, you know, the rows of filing cabinets in every office where you had to keep all these records for 5-10 years, entire rooms. And it's just amazing that we still have so much paper in this world.
Yep, still exists. No, it's not really so much a technology problem as it is an adoption problem. It's just that all the parties are reliant on it. So you have to have a solution. Like the technology piece of it needs to answer all of the different use cases while also managing the transition, because not everyone's just going to be able to go paperless overnight.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm, you know, throw out a Nestle, you know, big food company, and I'm shipping to Walmart, I'm shipping to Target. Walmart says I don't need paper at these 3 facilities, but I need paper at these 10. And Target says I don't need paper at these 5 facilities, but I need paper at these other 5. Like that's somewhat of a complicated thing because you have to think about the operations of Nestle, right? They want to stamp out drivers in and out. They have a person there that's like handling these drivers in and out. They want to, you know, stamp and go, like next. You can't be sitting here thinking, you know, it's very robotic, that process of managing the shipping office, particularly dealing with the drivers. So you can't be sitting there and be like, oh, okay, this one is going to that Walmart facility that doesn't need paper. So I'm not going to print any copy. Like it's just, I'm not going to print any copies for that one, but that one's going to this other Walmart facility that requires it. That would not be good. They're just going to print the same amount every time. And it's like a drug. You can't get off of it easily unless you've got a solution that controls for it. And so we've spent a good amount of time, as you can probably tell, we're talking about some pretty nitty gritty details about like operations and this like weird paper problem, but it's a big one. And we know that some of the largest companies in the world, we think that this problem largely gets solved by what I call the supply chain leads. Companies like Walmart, Kroger, Target, and the retail, grocery, and the auto OEMs, you know, the ends of the supply chain, not the ultimate customer, because particularly in retail, like you are the ultimate customer, but you know, the ones that operate the stores, the end of the supply chain, have all the leverage. They'll throw down some mandates over time to say this is how we're gonna to layer this in. And we actually just had an interesting conversation with one of our partners the other day, who was talking about RFID being something that's now being implemented at an item level from shipping within the retail supply chain. So think of, you've got a truckload of goods going from Nestle to Target or whatever that's got item level RFID. Well, that's actually like a great opportunity to eliminate some of that paperwork, because right now, one of the use cases for that paperwork, that bill of lading, that thing that I print, is somebody sitting there pulling pallets off the truck, and they've got the paper and they're checking it off, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you've got item level RFID arch, well, you no longer need that piece of paper to check things off. It's all automatically capturing all of that. So first of all, you don't functionally need that paperwork anymore. And it's also that digital bill of lading, if that becomes an intercompany registration for those products potentially. So it's an interesting use case. It's one of those things where if that becomes pervasive, then it's a logical way of moving off of that paper-based reconciliation project, which is paperwork. The other use case is that person's checking things off, right? But then they're indicating on there, they're saying, okay, I was 10 short, or I have, there was 10 damaged or whatever. That becomes a proof of delivery, right? That's the thing that when I'm Nestle and I'm Target and I'm arguing about what, Nestle thought I shipped 100 things and Target says, no, I only got 90. So that's written on that bill of lading and it's signed, and that carrier's getting paid off of that, and that supplier's getting paid off of the 90. So then that becomes a whole reconciliation issue. So all of that stuff sort of washes out a little bit as technology adoption becomes a little bit more pervasive.
Yeah.
It becomes less of a human paper-based thing, more of like an automated chain of custody capture. So you got me on my paperwork. We're not even talking about yard stuff, but yeah, that's just a piece of what we do.
For sure. It's really exciting. I mean, I don't know that I've come across, I got my start at FreightWays selling blockchain and transportation alliance memberships. The whole goal of that association was to digitize, right? Eliminate paper from the equation. I know it's something that people have been wanting to do for a long time. You can't digitize if everything's still on paper. So it's really cool to hear that, paper may be on its way out the door as long as, Moore's law continues up and to the right, which more than likely will.
When it goes into, in blockchain, paperless standards, right? Universal standards for how systems talk to each other, how everything's formatted, how everything works. And that's always been, in all industries and at all times, it's always been kind of one of the hardest challenges to overcome.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's that is obviously one of the big challenges. I think another challenge is related to just making sure that all the different uses for the paper are controlled for, and the transition period is controlled for. The lack of standards, I think, is an interesting one because it does, you just wind up with middleware that helps kind of control for those, the lack of standards. But it makes things more complicated, and you wind up with all kinds of data silos, and it makes it harder to share, to share data. That's a big thing in our world. There are companies, look at like Zapier. Zapier on non-supply chain, they just went out and found a bunch of open APIs and then created connectors to connect everything else to everything else. That doesn't exist in our world. Data super siloed. A lot of people are still on premise, and so actually, just the integration problem on its own is its own ball of wax. Everything still runs on EDI. We interact with EDI. We're interacting with EDI right now. Like we're constantly dealing with all of that. It's actually been, of all the things, not that bad. But that's I don't even know, 50-year-old, 60 years old technology. So a lot of antiquated systems, a lot of data silos. I feel like people have been talking about that forever. It still continues to be a problem. I remember being in a meeting with SAP a while ago, and 2021, 2020 something, and it was with a large auto supplier, and they were like, "Yeah, we need you to upgrade to the cloud version of our solution." And the deadline is, I think, 2023 or 2024 or something like that. And the guy just laughed. He's like, yeah, no, it's not happening. I don't even know where they're at in terms of migrating everybody to the cloud, but that's still a thing. A lot of the data that underlies a lot of these supply chain systems, like the ones we're doing, that it's sort of siloed in those areas. So,
right.
Early.
But it's interesting, though, to go back to your point about the RFID and that, like, potentially eliminating a BOL. It's like a lot of this information that gets put into those systems in disparate formats. It's all coming from that BOL, and RFIDs already have standards. So, like,
Yep.
maybe the standards are becoming less important, and there could be a world where people get to have their cake and eat it too, and not have to share data yet still be able to digitize.
Yep. I think that's one of the big values for that, right? It's just you still have to the information that's stored on the RFID still needs to be understood by both systems, but I think that's something that you can design from the bottom up. So,
right.
Yeah. Agreed there. It's interesting. Who knows? I think they've been talking about RFID forever, but the cost has come down pretty significantly.
I was about to say, there's another thing that's been around for 25 years, right? At least the acronym, right?
Yeah.
RFID, and it seemed like it was going to be a big thing, and then it wasn't, and then you hear it again. It's the wave of the future, and it's almost like you think, I don't know if it's true or not, but it kind of got leapfrogged. Something better came along, but I don't know. But yeah, it's just one of those buzzwords you've been hearing about. For me, it seems like forever, and it just really hasn't taken hold.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, for us, we're agnostic to that sort of technology, but it was an interesting thing that I'd heard. I think it was a Moore's Law thing there as well, where the price is getting to the point where it's 1 to 2 cents or whatever for the cheapest one. So you can put that on a
Twinkie.
Yeah.
Right. Hypothetically. And that's interesting. I was listening to the last episode, or one of the most recent episodes of the Freight Pod, and Andrew Silverhead on, I can't remember the kid's first name, but it's one of the, Stevens trucking family members, and he's in charge of, technology over there, and implementing, considering technology as well as like the change management. So it's like a really interesting conversation, but they're a trucking company. And like he was talking about tracking from the trailer level, right? They've got 400 tractors and 1,600 trailers. So knowing where you may have different drivers, you got somebody who picks it up, takes it to the terminal. Tracking from the cell phone doesn't really solve that problem. But like, if you can tell where the trailer is, where the freight is, right? And like, that's how they can answer the question of, where is my freight? And then if you have people like the shipper themselves, the BCO, tracking it from, an individual Twinkie by Twinkie level as well. It seems to be an interesting world where, visibility does exist for everybody in their own unique instance. Maybe it's not as efficient as it could be, but they still kind of solve the problems that people have been thinking about for the last couple of years in freight tech.
Yeah, I think there's the RFID stuff. From my understand, it's it's an operational thing, right? Because you're instead of scanning every individual item, it just automatically happens. So it helps fight that shrinkage a little bit less about like where it is in route or en route. But yeah, at the end of the day, similar thing. You lose a truckload of goods, or you lose like certain items, that shrinkage. So yeah, but yeah, it's everything in this space seems to take a little while. Because there's so much reliant on it, right? Like everything up here, the goods that consumer goods that you purchase, and everything is underlied by a supply chain. So
Right.
My perspective is, yeah, it's like the tail of the dog. Like the supply chain is the dog. It's like, if you're going to make any changes, you've got to be damn well sure that you know what you're doing, because if you have a disruption, your plant needs to shut down for some period of time, or you've got massive lines. Well, that's going to have add-on effects that just cascade all the way through.
Right. It's like you gotta, add extra lanes to the highway without stopping any flow of traffic. And like the expectation is that, the speed limit increases 5 miles an hour a year because there's guys like you and I that, need our, Amazon goods or groceries or whatever it may be. You're trying to improve this thing as it, needs to continue to function better and better every day. It's a really interesting perspective that I hadn't really considered before. The manufacturing plant that you're trying to, upgrade and automate while also, increasing your production and not having any downtime.
Yeah. That's I think one of the main reasons why this stuff just, it drags out a bit. It takes a while. And, because it's just a steady flow of goods, and if you disrupt that flow, then that's your revenue stream. If you're a public company, you're going to miss a quarter, and that's going to be bad.
Exactly.
And so, you've got to really feel very confident that whatever you're implementing is going to A, not result in a lot of downtime, and B, not going to impact your ongoing operations in a negative way. So it's that really butts heads with innovation, right? Because a lot of times innovation does require investment. In our world, my one of my favorite corollaries, back to the paper stuff, is remember back in the 90s, early 2000s, the move from cash to card, right? When you walked up to the line in the grocery store, you had a credit card, or the person in front of you had a credit card. You're like, oh, they had to pull out I don't know if you remember the thing. Yeah, and they had to swipe it, and it would always take forever, So credit cards were just like a royal pain. They cost the store more. So there was this investment that you had to make in order to accept credit cards, and it would annoy all your customers. And so, but now, I haven't used cash, and I don't even know, I don't really carry it anymore. It's right. That sort of thing, that sort of mentality is a little bit tricky in the supply chain space because of what we sort of just talked about, where if all of a sudden you're, whatever you've implemented is slowing things down a little bit as opposed to speeding them up. Well,
it's not ready for production. And you've already you're lucky enough to stay in business.
Right. So as a buyer, a buyer of those products, you've got to make, feel pretty confident that what you're implementing is going to work and it's going to speed things up. And, we spent a lot of time in our system trying to control for a lot of these things that we know are hesitations from technology buyers. So it's it's good. It pays dividends, which is nice. And then it does wind up speeding things up a bit and, making things better. So we aim to bring, like, one of our big values is essentially, there's a lot of human to human interaction right now in the yard. And we want to bring that human to human interaction to essentially zero, if you want it to be zero. If you're a truck driver.
Let's talk about yard. We've been talking about paper. Let's talk about yard. Let's talk about automation and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. So what I was saying there was, when I think about the yard, there's really 4 different personas in the yard. There's the dock coordinator, who's kind of like the air traffic controller. There's the guard, which is sort of security. There's the spotter, who's moving stuff around in the yard. And then there's the driver. And when I think about the guard and the dock coordinator, they're kind of similar. They can be the same. It can be one persona. It can be 2, depending on how big the yard is. But at each point along the process, the drivers, my perspective, or our perspective of the company is, if the driver doesn't need to talk to somebody, then that takes that 1 minute, 2 minute 3-minute, 10-minute interaction out of that person's day. And if you just have driver after driver after driver, that's all you're doing, right? So same thing going back to the airport. Back in the day when you had to stand in line to wait for the gate agent, you needed 10 gate agents, right? There's 10 different people and there was a big line. Well, now that you can go to the kiosk or you can check in, it's very simple stuff, but you can check in online, go straight to security. You don't need as many gate agents, right? So the more of that human interaction that we can take out of the whole process and the more we can allow the driver to steer their own yard experience, the fewer gate agents are needed at that yard. And so those gate agents can be repurposed to do other things or, whatever it is. And at the same time, if you go back, just before COVID, when the ELD mandate came in 2017, there was a lot of groaning in the trucking community. I got to learn this new technology and but that's 8 years ago at this point, or 7.5 years ago. And then you had COVID come in, where a lot of people started just saying, "Okay, I know not how to use technology now. I'm being forced by my carrier to use ELD and other things, and I actually would prefer digital workflows." So not only are we trying to take that interaction away between the people that work in the yard and the driver, so that the people that work in the yard can be repurposed, we're also giving the driver a more preferential experience, being able to just do everything on their phone and get in and out. And combine that with the fact that
such a massive time savings, right?
Now
a really great, rosy person-to-person interaction in the yard, and it didn't affect their hours of service, but it does, right?
Yep. And that's the other thing is, now drivers are all on compressed timelines, right? Going back to what I said before about one of the catalysts for me was just seeing what Amazon was doing in supply chain. Well, that's at least 10 years old now, but everything's now next day delivery. Stuff's got to be where it's going to be before people. It's got to be there before people actually buy it. And so all the timelines are compressed. Drivers are stressed. They want to get in and out. They don't want to be standing in line. It's very frustrating for them. So if we can get them just in and out with a better experience, where they don't have to be waiting in line, and it takes away frustration, it takes away the likelihood of conflict. Also, I believe the number is over 50% of drivers, their native language in the U.S. is not English. So being able to interact with something that can speak your native language as opposed to somebody like a person that can't helps reduce miscommunications. A lot of this stuff just creates sort of three benefits. One is, less paper, as we talked about, but also the other is less labor. And the third is getting drivers in and out faster. So getting truck turnaround times down. And so it's where we see the gap in the market is really with this driver experience. A lot of the traditional yard management companies, I bifurcate the yard into sort of two areas. One is I call trailer management, which is once my assets are there, where are my assets in the yard? Which slot are they in? Which docks are open? All of that stuff. And then the other is driver management, where facilities have adopted yard management systems, but there's still all this manual process with these drivers. And really, I think the driver management piece is the piece that's really kind of open now. And it's really been just the last couple of years since COVID, since ELD mandate first, then COVID, and now the bottlenecks that came from COVID, facilities are starting to focus on providing these better experiences. And now you have the market tightening a bit. I think it's a good time to be focused on this now. So it's interesting.
Efficiencies. It's all about efficiencies and keeping everything straight. A lot of warehouses, yards, You have a lot of paper running around. You have a lot of people, a lot of contacts, a lot of tribal knowledge stuck here and there that makes it difficult to keep track of.
Tribal knowledge is a big one too.
That goes getting drivers in there, out of it, scheduling correctly. It kind of all flows into that big word, efficiencies.
Yep. Yeah. Tribal knowledge is a big one because that's essentially makes hiring difficult, right? And in a market, an inflationary market, people costs are going up. I think what people want to move more toward, particularly when you start thinking about like autonomous trucks, which is, it's something that is happening. It's
right.
in the process, right? You don't want like the head dock coordinator that's been there 25 years, who's, knows how to tell everybody what to do in the yard.
Yeah.
Managing like an autonomous truck showing up, like you're not right.
They don't speak
a piece of paper.
They don't speak
right?
English or any of the other languages that your
right. Yeah.
truck driver does, right?
Speak binary. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's that's one of the things is I think the yard needs to become more mechanized and less of this sort of tribal. This is how we do things, and I think that will be beneficial. That's beneficial for pretty much everybody involved. And when you think about like autonomous trucks, there needs to be we treat driver like the driver. We create like unique driver profiles. We have at this point, I think over 150,000 drivers in our system who we've passively onboarded. We would treat autonomous trucks as the same way, and communicating with the unique underlying operating systems for how they arrive. Now, I'm speaking a little tongue in cheek here. We're not doing autonomous right now, but I'm just thinking about the future as to how that will all work.
Right.
I think it's going to be a little while before autonomous trucks are really driving into yards because it's a complicated environment, but it's something that's going to have to be handled at some point.
Right, exactly. It's it's interesting. I saw a post from Ryan Joyce with a bunch of Tesla autonomous trailers pulling stuff for Pepsi and maybe U.S. Foods, and like based on the conversation, specific yard that only does autonomous picks, or there's some way to keep that autonomous pickup away from 95% of freight that they're moving that is done by people behind the wheel, because the second that one of those autonomous trucks crashes into or gets in the way of Jamie Anderson when he's coming to pick up the freight, they'll have hell to pay. Right, and it'll have knock-on effects for their supply chain. So it's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Totally. I think certainly in January 1st of 2050, which is closer to us than January 1st of 2000.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
January 1st, it's going to be completely, almost unrecognizable, probably from what we're doing today, or hopefully it is.
That framing makes me a little sad, but but yes, that's true. And you've got all this generative AI stuff out there now that's really accelerating. I think there was $500 billion announced by the Trump administration and OpenAI and all this. Have a lot of investment going on in the stuff that propels the underlying algorithms that things like autonomous trucks use. So,
you had the release of
DeepSeek
this week that could disrupt everything again, making it cheaper, right?
Yep.
And it takes me back to the internet boom and bust, right? of the online companies and web, and a little early, and you never know what's going to happen. But also the telecom bust happened about the same time, which was horrible for telecom companies at the time.
Have we recovered from the AI bubble burst yet, Jake? Was that the bubble?
What do you mean? Oh,
I don't know. I think the market lost a couple $1 trillion when DeepSeek came out.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've read here and there. I don't know enough about it. It's you see, Andreessen, I think, said that he was really impressed by it. Then you got people claiming that they've got like 50,000 NVIDIA GPUs that they're not talking about. So the actual investment was significantly higher. Hard to know. If they did what they say they did, then yeah, I think that poses some questions, right? Like, is it really that expensive to do all of this? Do we really need $500 billion in data center infrastructure to lead the world in AI? As of right now, it's based on the models that we have. I think it's probably right? But if DeepSeek is correct, then yeah, I'm not smart enough, above my pay grade.
Fair enough.
Sure. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the telecom boom, laying the broadband through pipelines, and it just blew up capacity to where 20 years later we reap the benefits of that, or 10 years later even, because communications became so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Became broadband, internet is able to spread. So it kind of goes back to DeepSeek, and if it's really that cheap, it really allows a lot more to be done to get to the singularity where where we all become slaves to an AI master. I mean, we're getting there very closely, and this could accelerate that process. So, not overly looking forward to the singularity, but no, it's fair. I mean, for me, it's a little bit hard to believe that it's that they're able to do it that at that price, but because then you just take whatever they did and you throw a bunch of money behind it, and starts inflecting faster and faster. So, but yeah, no, sorry, took us totally off topic. It's fine. It is fine.
Great tangent.
Well, Jake, thanks for stopping by, being on Dude What's the Bid this week. How do our audience, how do they reach out, contact you, learn more about FreightRoll, and get in front of you?
Yeah, I'm not the most social media type person, so the easiest thing would be just reach out to my email, which is just jake@freightroll.com. I do have social medias. You can find me on LinkedIn, and well, that's probably the most relevant place, but easiest would just be my email.
So. And it's FreightRoll.com. Is that the website?
Yep.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, appreciate you guys having me join. So
yeah,
it was
thank
fun.
you.
Our pleasure, Jake. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, no problem. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Talk soon.
Bye.
So Casey, paper. It's weird. There's much less paper than there was 25, 30 years ago, but it always amazes me that everything still is kind of paper based.
Always comes back to paper.
It really does. Remember, and you have like field notes and stuff in the yard. It's dusty, dirty, and it doesn't age very well.
No, it doesn't. Right? And then,
it gets lost. The wind takes it. It gets oil on it.
Right. Before you can like sit down in your truck that's vibrating because of this big, beautiful American made engine you have in it, and you're taking a picture and adding some more distortion to it.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect system, but I mean, to Jake's point, there are a lot of companies that have customers like us, whether it's Kroger or Amazon. They can't afford to have any slowdown in their deliveries, and that's why you need so many carriers, right? That's why there's so diversified the carrier base, and it takes so long to solve problems. But really exciting, because this is the first time that I've ever heard anybody that like actually has a plan, step-by-step process, and can explain how we eliminate paper from the industry, because it's very
getting drivers in and out of facilities with the best efficiency there is, because we know that detention is tied up in a lot of ways to those facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, could be a really cool thing that would lead to less drivers staying overnight and in hotels. Wouldn't tell the hospitality industry about this, because they probably wouldn't be too happy about it, right?
Yeah.
Things like this that make me excited about being in freight tech in these times, right?
Exactly right. So, with that, any parting words? Parting thoughts?
I don't think so.
Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Well, I really hope that it's not the Chiefs. Had enough of the Chiefs. A lot of Chiefs fans in the LinkedIn freight world. Really unapologetic Chiefs fans. So it would be nice if the Eagles could bring this one home, and Taylor Swift's not won enough already, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I just have to say, I'm a Jalen Hurts fan.
Yeah,
but at OU, so I like OU guys. So I want to see Jalen Hurts do well.
Me too. He's I'd forgotten that he had played at Oklahoma. I remember all the years at Alabama.
Yeah.
Guy's a athletic freak. I think he can squat 600 or 700 pounds or something like that. But that tush push is lethal, and hopefully they're leaning on him and his quads to, I can't believe I'm saying this, bring a Super Bowl home for the Eagles.
Yeah, I know. Well, cool. Well, until next week, we have Wasim on next week, I believe.
Sweet.
Yeah. We're talking about jobs and employment and kind of that sentiment too. That's a great leading indicator too. This is how optimistic people are in hiring, especially both ends, right? Executive type of roles, as well as with those executives who they're going to have to hire on the floor to capture any
marketing,
any change in the market.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be good. But yeah, from my just go out and make some more margin. Enjoy life. Have fun.
Right.
And with that, we'll see you next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central.
Forward to it.